Mr. Chairman. So when we see your full budget later this month, we'll be asking some tough questions about the merits of your proposed increases when we know others will be struggling. Despite not having a complete budget, I'm sure members will find plenty of VA topics to ask you about this morning. How you envision VA striking a balance between care and VA facilities versus non-VA community facilities, making the electronic health record work for veterans, especially as they see more doctors through choice, your efforts to tackle appointment scheduling problems, how you plan to approach disability claim backlogs and appeals, your plans to decrease veteran suicide and homelessness, your campaign to limit opioid abuse among veterans, plans to access care for rural and female veterans. And that's probably just a start. They'll think of other things, I'm sure, the members. So, Mr. Secretary, we're going to include your full statement today in the hearing record, and we'll be pleased to hear your oral statement. But before you begin, I'll ask our ranking member, Ms. Wasserman-Schultz, if she has any opening comments she would like to make. Then after that, the chair and the ranking member of the full committee. So that, Ms. Wasserman-Schultz is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome, Mr. Secretary. It's been a pleasure to talk with you over the last few weeks, and good to have you in my office yesterday. We do appreciate you being here in your new capacity, and I echo the chairman's comments, particularly given that it's an awkward situation that we find ourselves in. You're operating on a bigger stage than you were previously, and with greater responsibility that come with the duties of being the Secretary of the VA. Mr. Chairman, since fiscal year 2008, the VA has seen a tremendous 70% increase in key VA accounts. The VA medical care accounts have grown from $36.7 to $64.4 billion, and the overall discretionary accounts have increased from $43.6 billion to $74.3 billion. And FY 2018 is no different. The President's skinny budget even requests $78.9 billion, or a 6% increase from the 2017 enacted level. The 2018 budget also requests legislative authority and $3.5 billion in mandatory authority to continue the Veterans Choice Program. And what is a question that arises is that this would support a program that was initially meant as a stopgap temporary fund. Mr. Secretary, while I am certainly thrilled to have you here today, it's unfortunate that we won't be able to discuss the specifics of the VA budget request, and the lack of detail makes it extremely challenging for the committee to properly do our job. Moreover, given this 70% increase over the past 10 years, it's critical that this committee has the opportunity to analyze and understand these numbers, as well as know more about why the VA continues to have issues of mismanagement, wait times, and less than adequate care. While I can understand that this degree of growth has its growing pains, it is crucial that we understand how these issues are being addressed. And once we more fully understand those issues, at what point do we ask if this continued growth is unsustainable? Mr. Secretary, I ask these questions with genuine concern for the future of the VA. Obviously, our driving concern must be to provide the best care to our veterans. However, if we don't control costs and ensure that the resources this committee provides are used in an appropriate and efficient fashion, we actually hurt our ability to help veterans and deliver on our mission of providing top quality care. It comes to mind that while we are providing additional resources, we're not seeing what would normally come as the commensurate response from the people who are receiving these services because of the challenges that the VA is having in providing those services efficiently. Top quality care is really our top priority, and we need to make sure that we help you deliver on that mission. With that in mind, Mr. Chairman, it's imperative that we discuss a number of key issues, including the choice program and the state of the VA's electronic health records. How does the VA envision choice, a mandatory program, working with community care, a discretionary program? After creating the community care account, which includes $9.4 billion in advanced FY18 appropriations, why does the budget request also include $3.5 billion for the choice program? Additionally, where is the VA in implementing and improving its electronic health record system and in executing Congress's mandate for full interoperability with DoD systems? As we discussed this past Monday in my office, Mr. Secretary, a solution to this issue is long overdue. And finally, I hope you can address the significant number of vacancies at the department and when these positions are expected to be filled. Currently, 11 Senate confirmable positions remain vacant, including the Undersecretary for Benefits, the Undersecretary for Health, the Undersecretary for Memorial Affairs, the General Counsel, the Assistant Secretary for Information and Technology, the Assistant Secretary for Policy and Planning, the Assistant Secretary for Management, and the Chairman of the Board of Veterans Appeals. And by the way, the Veterans Appeals process is an absolute mess. And so for it to have no chair for as long as that has occurred is really unacceptable. And from our discussions, I really believe that you earnestly want to reform and improve the VA. It is reflective in the confidence that was placed in you with a unanimous vote for your confirmation from the United States Senate. And it's our duty, I believe, to ensure that you have adequate resources to do so and that proper oversight is in place to guard against abuses and mismanagement. As you can see, we have a lot to discuss today. And Mr. Chairman, thank you for the opportunity to share my concerns, and I yield back.
Thanks, Ranking Member. At this time, I'd like to recognize the Chair of the full committee, Mr. Frelinghuysen in New Jersey.
Great. Well, thank you, Chairman Dent and Ranking Member Wasserman Schultz. First of all, I want to give you a shout out for passing your bill last year in September. Thank you for that effort. You were the pace setters. I wish we could have followed your pace, but in reality, we didn't. But I can't think of a more important department than the Department of Veterans Affairs. I mean, those who've served our country and serve our country right now in dangerous places deserve when they get home to get the best care possible. And I know you from your time in New Jersey and wonderful things you did there, and for good reason you were unanimously confirmed by the Senate. There's not a lot of unanimity over there, but I'm glad that they focused their attention and support for you. Two areas of particular interest to me, and I don't want to take time away from your remarks or questions, continuing be the appeals and benefit backlog. It's a nightmare. I've even shared with you some of the 3 or 4 year waiting periods for people. Obviously, evidence has to be collected and verified, but in reality, it's pretty nightmarish prospect, and certainly the confirmation of your undersecretaries might be helpful in that regard. So hopefully that'll happen. And the last area that has been continual interest to me is electronic medical records. I think 3 years ago, then Chairman Rogers hosted Chuck Hagel, Secretary of Defense, and Rick Shinseki, one of your predecessors, and we received a commitment from, I think, former General Shinseki that we would have within a year some sort of a solution. I know the Department of Defense, and given the resources they've been given, is getting up to speed, but I do view your systems as sort of the weak link. So I just personally feel that this is something which is enormously important in a day and age when we have so much information passing back and forth, obviously encrypted and protected. To not have that available to our healthcare providers is pretty inexcusable. But good luck and Godspeed, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Lowy, I'd like to recognize you.
Thank you very much, and I would like to thank Chairman Dent and Ranking Member Wasserman Schultz for holding this important hearing, and I welcome Secretary Shulkin today. We as members of Congress and you as the Secretary of Veterans Affairs have a duty to provide the best care available to our veterans who have sacrificed and faithfully served our nation. The VA faces serious challenges in meeting their health needs. After working for years to reduce the claims backlog, it is once again increasing. And the Choice program will soon run out of money and is in need of reform. And the VA and Department of Defense are not significantly closer to the interoperability of electronic health records than they were years ago. We owe it to all current and former future veterans to tackle these challenges now, and this subcommittee is committed to achieving that goal. I must say, after reading your resume, I am so optimistic. As was referenced before, Chairman Rogers and I had, I think, 4 hearings. Right, Chairman Frelinghuysen? We also met in closed-door sessions, but we haven't been able to resolve this. Now, I have my own personal preference about who's to blame, as we were talking about it before. But that's irrelevant now. And looking at your resume, I am so enthusiastic, and I know you're going to get this done. In my own district, I've worked to secure federal funding to improve rehab facilities and ensure that veterans can receive a high quality of care. But for too many, the VA is unable to provide the types of services they require. From women struggling to find care in a health system that has traditionally served men, to veterans who are turned away from VA facilities when they are most in need, the VA has a responsibility to serve all veterans who seek the care and treatment they have earned. In light of these challenges, Congress awaits the details of the President's FY18 budget request. The budget framework requests an increase of 6% for the VA, but lacks detail, providing just 7 bullet points of vague proposals. While you may not be able to speak to details of the budget proposal now, I hope you will return after its release so we can fully discuss it. Mr. Secretary, I again thank you for being here today. Thank you for your commitment to improving the lives of veterans, and thank you for assuming the responsibility. I look forward to hearing about all your success sooner rather than later, so we won't, in a bipartisan way, continue to talk about backlogs and the lack of records. So we have confidence in you, and I thank you for appearing here today.
Thank you, Mrs. Lowy. At this time, I'd like to recognize Secretary Shulkin for 5 minutes.
Oh, maybe that's better. Okay. Chairman Frelinghausen, Chairman Dent, Ranking Member Lowy, Ranking Member Wasserman Schultz, and all of you who are here today. I was so impressed with your opening statements and so many topics that you've thought about and that you care about, and I know are serious issues, and we're trying to do things differently at the VA, that I have a terrific opening statement. But I'm willing to, Mr. Chairman, to actually forgo it and get right into your questions, unless you would prefer me to go through the opening statement. Because I think we have so many issues, and I want to use your time most valuable. I've submitted it for the record. I'd be glad to read through it, read through my oral statement, but I'll leave it up to you. You'd like to hear it?
Yeah.
Oh, good. Okay. Okay. I told you it's terrific.
The abridged version, about 5 minutes worth.
Okay. I'll try to do it quickly, but thank you. Okay. So thanks for the opportunity to be here today to talk about the President's 2018 budget. I also want to thank you all for your support of the 2017 budget that really gave us for the first time our full budget from the start of the fiscal year. It really speaks well of the U.S. Congress and really of the American people that despite all these differences, and you've mentioned this several times, that we can come together on this topic to support our nation's veterans. I have submitted the full statement for the record. The President's 2018 budget reflects his strong personal commitment to our nation's veterans, provides the necessary resources to continue the ongoing modernization of the VA system. The budget requests $78.9 billion in discretionary funding for VA, a 6% increase from the 2017 enacted level. It provides $4.6 billion more for medical care, a 7.1% increase, and the $3.5 billion more in mandatory budget authority that was mentioned to continue the Veterans Choice Program. More veterans are opting for choice than ever before, 5 times more in fiscal year 2016 than fiscal year 2015, and choice authorizations are still rising. We've issued 35% more authorizations in the first quarter of fiscal year 2017 than in the same quarter of 2016. All told, including both care at VA facilities and in the community, we project a 6.6% increase in ambulatory care for 2018 over 2016. I urge you to support and fully fund our 2018 request to enable VA to meet increasing demands for VA services, to modernize the VA systems, and to invest in choice. As you know, I came to VA during a time of crisis when it was clear that veterans were not getting the timely access to high-quality health care they deserved. I know VA has made significant progress in improving care and services to veterans, but I also know that much more must be done if VA is to continue keeping President Lincoln's promise to care for those who have borne the battle. Last week, I had an opportunity to meet two courageous young Americans, Michael and Sarah Verrado of Rhode Island. All Michael ever wanted to do was to be a soldier, and he became a soldier, serving in the Army's 82nd Airborne Division. Then he lost a leg and part of his arm in an IED explosion in Afghanistan. He suffered other wounds as well. They told me when he sought care from the VA in 2014, they did not receive the care. We cannot allow ourselves to ever again fail our American heroes like the Verrados. Meeting Michael and Sarah underscored for me the urgency of VA modernization. My 5 priorities as Secretary are to provide greater choice for veterans, to modernize our systems, to focus resources more efficiently, to improve the timeliness of our services, and suicide prevention among veterans. We are already taking bold steps towards achieving each of these priorities. 2 weeks ago, the President signed the reauthorization of the Veterans Choice Act, ensuring veterans can continue to get care from community providers. Just last week, the President ordered the establishment of a VA accountability office, and we're moving as quickly as we can within the limits of the law to remove bad employees. VA has removed medical center directors in San Juan, Shreveport, Louisiana, and recently we've relieved the medical center director right here in Washington, D.C., and removed 3 other senior executive service leaders due to misconduct or poor performance. We simply cannot tolerate employees who act counter to our values or put veterans at risk. Since January of this year, we've authorized an estimated 6.1 million community care appointments, 1.8 million more than last year, a 42% increase. We now have same-day services for primary care and mental health at all of our medical centers across the country. Veterans can now access wait time data for their local VA facilities by using an easy online tool where they can see those wait times. No other healthcare system in the country has this type of transparency. VA is setting new trends with public-private partnerships. Last month, we announced a public-private partnership of an ambulatory care development center with a donation of roughly $30 million in Omaha, Nebraska, thanks to Mr. Fortenberry's help there. Veterans now have or will have a facility that's being built with far fewer taxpayer dollars than in the past. Finally, VA is saving lives. My top clinical priority is suicide prevention. On average, 20 veterans a day die by suicide. A few months ago, the Veterans Crisis Line had a rollover rate to a backup center of more than 30%. Today, that rate is less than 1%. In support of our efforts to reduce suicides, we've launched new predictive modeling tools that allow VA to provide proactive care and support for veterans who are at the highest risk of suicide. And I've recently announced the VA will be providing emergency mental health care to former service members with other than honorable discharges at all of our medical facilities. We know that these veterans are at greater risk for suicide, and we're now caring for them as well as we can. These are just a few of the efforts that are underway, but are already improving the lives of veterans. But to keep moving forward, we need your help. We need Congress to help us realign our capital infrastructure, to dispose of property we don't need, and to support facilities where veterans can get better served. We need Congress to fund our IT modernization to keep our legacy systems from failing and to increase the interoperability of electronic health records essential to any high-performing integrated health system. We're also weighing options for adopting a commercial off-the-shelf alternative to our legacy systems. I've scheduled a decision for this in July. If it makes sense to go to the off-the-shelf route, we'll need some additional support from you as well. We need Congress to authorize the overhaul of our broken and failing claims appeals process that many of you have mentioned. Working closely with veteran service organizations and other stakeholders, VA has drafted legislation to modernize the system. We've submitted our proposal to the 114th Congress, and we've resubmitted it in this current Congress. We need Congress to act on this. Most of all, we need Congress to ensure the continued success of choice for veterans. Extending the choice program past its August end date was an absolute necessity, and thank you for that. But extending the program was just the next step towards the modernization of community care that veterans deserve. We charted a course for modernization and are already moving forward, but we need your help to keep up with the choice program's growth, maintain our momentum, and make our community care plan a reality for all veterans for generations to come. In closing, let me again express my thanks to the Appropriations Committee and to this subcommittee for the support that you've shown veterans in recent years. Without that support, we could not have expanded choice to a record number of veterans while also curing so many veterans of hepatitis C. You've made that possible, and 77,000 veterans are now free of hepatitis C as a result. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today. I look forward to all the questions that you may have.
Yeah, at this time, I'd like to recognize the chair of the full committee, Mr. Freeland-Heising, if he has any questions.
Very briefly, you talk of the legacy system. The acronym is VISTA. Now you're looking at a off-the-shelf system. Isn't the issue here you have IT systems, different IT systems at every hospital? So where are you in the overall? Very briefly, where are you in terms of maybe some good news in the mix?
Right. Well, we only have 130 different systems. Okay, so the VISTA system is something that frankly VA should be proud of. It invented it. It was the leader in electronic health records, but frankly that's old history, and we have to look at keeping up and to modernize the system. I've said two things, Mr. Chairman, in the past. I've said number one is VA has to get out of the business of becoming a software developer. This is not our core competency. I don't see why it serves veterans. I think we're doing this in a way that, frankly, we can't keep up with. So I've said that we're going to get out of that business. We're either going to find a commercial company that will take over and support VISTA, or we're going to go to an off-the-shelf product. And that's really what we're evaluating now. We have an RFI out for essentially the commercialization of VISTA that we wouldn't longer be doing internally. The second thing I've said is that, and I think it was referenced in several of your comments, you have asked the Department of Defense and VA to work together probably for 10 or 15 years. And we've always found ways not to do that. Secretary Mattis and I have talked about this. We believe that we need to find ways to work together. So when I come out in July, I'm going to be talking about a process that led to a decision to get us out of the software development business and to find a way to work even closer with the Department of Defense than we have. And we're working rapidly towards that decision, and I'm committed to that date. Thank you for that progress. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. This time I'd like to recognize Mrs. Lowy.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. There are so many questions, but I must continue this discussion, having been part of this issue of records for the last 5, 6, 7 years. And I gather we have spent $1.4 billion on this. I don't even know what I want to call it. Project, search, interoperability. But what I'm confused about, it's my understanding that the Defense Department has already rolled out the system. It seems to me you make a lot of sense saying, we're not going to be in this business anymore. We want an off-the-shelf system. However, in order to ensure there's interoperability, what's wrong with the defense program? And why wouldn't you, at least at the outset, explore that? Because if you choose another system and they have their system, what's it going to be, another $1 billion that we could use for suicide prevention, for treatment, for all kinds of important things? I have to tell you, as the ranking member, Chairman Freeling-Heising and I go to a lot of committee hearings, but this affects my heart. And when I talk to veterans in the district, and I know the challenges they are facing, and I know that you have all the competence background to do it, why wouldn't you start, or are you looking at the system the Defense Department has rolled out?
Yeah, so first of all, I hear your
Frustration.
That's probably a good
I'm
word.
smiling.
Right, you-
So we've had hearings
Yes,
where the
yes,
anger
yes,
was
yes.
palpable.
Yes, no, listen, Congress has been very clear on this for years and years, and that's why I believe that you and the American people and the veterans deserve a clear direction on this, and I'm committed to doing that. I can tell you we are exploring all options. I am sure you understand this is a highly complex issue, and I've lived through personal electronic medical record conversions in hospitals that I've led. These are not easy projects in single hospitals, let alone talk about the size of the VA system. So we're taking this very seriously. I can assure you we're exploring all of those options. We also, as we get more veterans out into the community, out into the private sector hospitals, we have to be very concerned about interoperability with those partners as well. So if there was an easy solution here, I am sure it would have been made already. But we're going to make a decision, and we're going to move forward with it, and we're going to need your help in being able to implement that.
I just want to say thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank you for assuming the responsibilities that our veterans certainly are looking for and they deserve, and I wish you the best of luck, and I look forward to your coming back sooner rather than later, because I don't want to have another hearing on interoperability.
Right.
So and I want to remind you again, $1.4 billion has already been spent on trying to get the Defense Department and the VA coordinated. So thank you so much
Thank you.
again. We look forward to hearing from you as soon as possible.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Lowy. Mr. Secretary, we understand that you're floating ideas for a system to consolidate the various non-VA care programs, including choice. And while we realize your proposals are by no means locked down, it sounds like you're contemplating a plan that would allow veterans to seek urgent care outside the VA system, followed by a discussion with a VA care provider and about whether the veteran should be seen in the community or by the VA. That decision would be based on the results of a local health market analysis identifying the capacity, quality, and cost of various services at the local VA. Is the basic premise of this proposal to keep services within the VA subject to availability, quality, and capacity, rather than open the doors more broadly to non-VA care?
Let me try to describe it, Mr. Chairman, a little bit differently than that. First of all, I think you're correct that what we've identified coming out of the 2014 wait time crisis out of Phoenix was that the VA, I don't believe, had the appropriate management systems in place. And the way I believe that you run a clinical system is that you put your clinical urgency first. So if somebody is waiting for a routine examination, that's normal. But somebody shouldn't be waiting if they have a tumor in their chest or if they have blood, coming out of parts of their body that they shouldn't have it coming out of. That needs urgent care right away. So we are going to prioritize and to make sure that veterans aren't waiting. Secondly, we're trying to build an integrated system of care. That means if you look at this from the veteran's perspective, which is really the only perspective we should be looking at this from, you want to take what the VA does best for veterans that you can't find as well in the private sector, and you want to take what the private sector does best that the VA doesn't do as well, and you want to make that an integrated experience for the veteran, and that's what we're trying to do. Currently, 1/3 of our care happens outside the VA walls, 2/3 inside. And we're working now to get the proper mix in each of the communities, because it will look different in New York City than it will in Arkansas, and try to figure out in that community what is the proper mix of inside VA and working with the community. And that's what we're hard at work at doing. And I think that this will benefit the veteran the most.
And just to kind of follow up on that, what cost governors would you include to keep the program costs to a manageable level?
Yeah. Well, I am very sensitive to cost, and my belief is that one of the reasons why we got into the problems that we did in VA is because we were not properly funding the actual demand. And that's why I think it's so important that we and you work with us to get what the President has requested for the 2018 budget, because I think that we need that. But I am not looking for non-sustainable increases year after year the way that we have in the past. And I think, as Congressman Wasserman Schultz said, that's an unsustainable solution. The problems that we have in the VA are not primarily financial. These are primarily system issues that we haven't kept up with and we haven't modernized. So I am looking for an investment this year to help us modernize our systems. The IT system will be one example of where we need to come back, but I am not going to be seeking increases of this type in future years to come. So we do need to put cost mitigation strategies in place. One of the areas that we're focusing on that I've already announced is fraud, waste, and abuse. I think that there are huge opportunities to identify waste and abuse in the current system. They're not the proper safeguards in place, and we are going to be taking some aggressive actions to do that. There are other cost mitigation strategies that I'm seeking as part of choice. One of them would be for the VA to be able to do value-based purchasing. The private sector has now moved towards this, where there are accountable care organizations to focus on quality and cost, and where you can purchase care based on the best value, which is cost over quality. We don't have those tools in the VA. In fact, we're restricted from using that. We have to pay a flat Medicare fee schedule. So I'm seeking the same tools that the private sector has to be able to control cost and improve quality.
And can I just quickly follow up? If Congress were to adopt your ideas, what would that mean for workforce and facility infrastructure needs?
In this budget?
Yes.
We are seeking the budget so that we can hire the proper healthcare professionals. We have now 45,000 clinical openings in the Veterans Health Administration, and another 4,000 openings outside of the Veterans Administration. So for a total of 49,300 employees that we're seeking. I think that, frankly, the crisis that we went through and the lack of good press, and so the impact on the morale of the workforce has really hurt us in recruiting. Of course, we had a hiring freeze in place up until April 12th. So we have fallen behind. And in particular, in my priority areas like mental health, I need 1,500 new mental health professionals to join the VA. So we're really prioritizing that right now, and this budget would allow us to get up to that staff.
Thank you, Secretary Shulkin. At this time, I'd like to recognize Ranking Member Ms. Wasserman Schultz for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First and foremost, I just wanted to suggest that, as a number of members have mentioned it, because the Secretary is limited to only speaking about the skinny budget, it would be incredibly helpful and important once we have the President's budget released for us to ask him to come back and hold a hearing on the actual full budget request. So I would ask both chairs to please consider doing that, just so we can delve into a little bit more detail. Thank you. I want to focus on the choice program for a moment, because you have asked for an additional $3.5 billion, and we talked about it yesterday a little bit, but we recently extended, as you mentioned, the choice program past the August expiration date, and there was $950 million left in the choice account. So in part, obviously, rather than letting that funding languish and considering that there's still a need, that made a lot of sense. But we did envision the choice program to be a temporary program initially. My understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, was that it was really supposed to be a bridge for the VA to transition to the community care program until we can get the community care program in a place where it's able to provide the kind of timely services that we need it to. If that's not the case, then can you explain the differences between the two? And you've also proposed Choice 2.0. So we have Choice 2.0, and community care. I'm not sure how it would ultimately help us realize our goal of efficiency if we have 3 different programs in the private sector to help make sure we can meet the needs of our veterans.
Right. I couldn't agree with you more. I'm looking for one program. 3 programs doesn't work. We now know having 2 programs, that didn't work very well. We confused veterans. We had two programs, Community Care and Choice. They had different rules. They put veterans at risk in their credit because some paid first dollar and others didn't, and you had to call different numbers to use them. We are proposing a single program for community care. As far as the intent of Congress with 3 years, look, Congress stepped up in a big way after the crisis when basically the country and Congress agreed that the current situation with veterans waiting for care was unacceptable. VA did exactly what Congress asked us to do, which is to put in place additional options for veterans to get care in the community. And now we are seeing those authorizations and appointments occurring in the community. When I started VA a little bit less than 2 years ago, we had 20% of our care in the community. Today, it's about 32%. So you can see we're expanding those options. I don't think there's any turning back from this. So whether it was intended to be authorized for 3 years or not, you know, I know that's what the legislation said. I think what we've seen is veterans need that care. They're coming to VA to seek that care, and we need to continue to support that. That's my opinion. So the $3.5 billion that was built into the program is very much a needed resource for our veterans.
And I understand, given that your goal is one program, are you analyzing which program ultimately would be phased out? Because we have a tendency to, instead of phasing out programs because they have people with a vested interest in them, simply
Yes.
going along to get along rather than rocking the boat. And so if we're adding $3.5 billion to the Choice program and it had $950 million left, there have been challenges with the Choice program and confusion, and there are still challenges with the Community Care program. In what direction is the VA thinking of going and what is the timeline for ultimately phasing out one program and only having one?
Well, with almost certainty, I can tell you there will not be 3 programs because the current Choice program will run out of money by the end of this calendar year. So that program is going to go away and should be through December of this year. What we are hoping to do is to work with you so that we can introduce a community care funding program. The chairman referred to it as Choice 2.0, which is a program that makes sense for veterans, which is a single program that operates under one set of rules for how veterans get care in the community. And that new legislation, which we believe needs to be introduced by late summer, early fall, in order to make the timeline, would end up with a single program.
So you'd eventually envision phasing out community care with the advent of Choice 2.0. Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to recognize the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Rooney, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to just sort of continue on, the same line briefly, or just maybe make a statement that our chairman of the full committee, as well as Ms. Lowy, Ms. Wasserman Schultz, pretty much everybody up here agrees. We've been giving you all a lot of money. And I've been on this committee with General Shinseki, who I served under at Fort Hood, with Mr. McDonough. He was a military man. Mr. McDonald, businessman. You're a doctor. By the way, we have a lot in common, even though I'm from Florida. I grew up in Philadelphia, I have a Pittsburgh connection, so I'm rooting for you. But, and you talked about working with General Mattis and trying to get this continuity of care. And we all talk about in the stump when we are, down in our districts, that if you put the uniform on and serve this country, we're going to take care of you. As you mentioned Lincoln, we often reference Washington. The country can measure itself by how it treats its veterans. And one of the things that we say, from the time that you enlist or the time that you get commissioned to the time that you die, you will not be, left out in the cold. We're going to take care of you. And one of the things that people ask me about is, well, where does it fall through the cracks? And we often talk about how, even though we're giving you all the money that you need, that, the difference between DOD and the VA is way too big, and whether it's, you know, the electronic records or just the fact that you have to basically start all over when you leave the military and you PCS and you get into the veterans, you know, program, whatever it is. I guess my first question to you is, if General Mattis has a better idea than you do, will you agree to go to his program just to get this moving? And I ask you this for this reason. You could be the best VA secretary of all time if you solve this one problem. And I mean, every time we sit up here and talk to people at this table, that we always keep asking the same question. And I know that there's a lot of bureaucracy, and I know that there's a lot of pride in whatever the problem is, but you know, we just hope that this, if it means you saying to Mattis, you know what, you're right, you have a better program, we're going to go with your program, will you do it?
Yeah. First of all, thank you for your comments, and I appreciate your perspective on this issue, how important it is. I'm only here for one reason, and that's to solve the problems that have plagued VA. I wish it was only one problem, by the way, but I agree with you. This is certainly an important problem for us. Anybody, whether it's Secretary Mattis or anyone else who has a better idea than I have, I'm going to take it. The answer to your question is yes. We want to resolve this issue in the best way, and if it means taking somebody else's idea, we're going to do that.
I mean, it would be so good to be able to go home and stand up on the stump and tell these guys, I come from a district with a lot of retirees in Florida, a lot of military retirees, and tell these guys, if you put on the uniform of this country, we are going to take care of you. Basically, if you need the health or the mental health after you serve, it's one of the advantages of joining is that you know that you're going to be taken care of when you get out. So that would be a huge help to all of us up here who are trying to convince people that fighting for this country has benefits well beyond just, you know, the pride of service. One quick thing, since I'm running out of time, and this is more specific to my district. I'm having my constituent services representatives down in Florida are telling me that we're getting a lot of people that are moving to Florida, as they always do, from other parts of the country, and they're going in to get care at our VA. And because of whatever breakdown in coverage, they are told that in my district that they are told to start a new treatment plan or return to the state to where they came from, where they were already getting care for whatever problems that they were having. And this is kind of absurd from the standpoint of that we've actually got 5 or 6 specific cases where people that live in Florida can't get the care that they were getting in their other states, so they're actually, rather than starting over in Florida, going back to their state where they came from and using that VA because they're already in that system. This again gets to that system where there shouldn't be any lapse in coverage, but there is. Can you talk about that? Have you heard about this at all, or?
I haven't heard about your specific situations, but I hope your directors are watching this right now, because what you described is unacceptable. We have one VA system. Veterans should be able to get care at any VA that they go into, and that is our commitment. I am not at all doubting that it doesn't work all the time.
Right.
I certainly hear many examples where it does work and people are able to get care. They're traveling, they lose their medications, they're able to get to a VA, get them refilled, get the care they need. That is the system that we are, that's our expectation of how we manage the system, and I will re-clarify that to our field.
Thanks, Doctor. Good luck.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Rooney. Mr. Secretary, if I could just interject on that point for a moment. Could you just describe the current Joint Legacy Viewer?
Yes.
And what it can do to share DOD and VA records, just for the benefit of some of the members.
Right.
And we'll go to Mr. Bishop.
Yeah, and I'm sorry that Congresswoman Lowy left for this, because I didn't say this to her, but we did certify interoperability with the Department of Defense in April 2016. That is through the Joint Legacy Viewer. That's probably where a lot of her $1.4 billion went to, although I don't think it was that much. And what this does is this allows any VA clinician, any DOD clinician to be able to access records from the other systems. So it is a read-only system. It's being used tens of thousands of times a month by our clinicians in both systems. So it does work, and it's a lot better than before when we didn't have that ability. It's better care. But it is not the complete interoperability that I think that all of us would hope for. It's a read-only system at this point.
Thank you for that clarification. Mr. Bishop.
Thank you very much, and welcome, Mr. Secretary, and let me join my colleagues in congratulating you and thanking you for your commitment to get these problems fixed. Let me go to an area of improving timeliness of service, which is third-party uncollected billing. The FY16 Milcom v. Appropriations Act directed the VA to submit an annual report identifying the amount of third-party health billings that are owed to the VA and the annual amount that's collected. In addition, it required that the VA include a plan to capture uncollected third-party billings. The VA was directed to initiate a pilot program to figure out how best to capture the uncollected billings. The difference between billings and collections in FY15 was $4.7 billion, and in FY16, it was $5.164 billion. This is alarming because it means that billions in uncollected dollars are not available to the VHA to provide the services to veterans. What is the status of the pilot program, and who in the department is responsible for the fiscal management of third-party billings and collections? And if you could answer that quickly, I wanted to move to another area.
Congressman, I'll try to answer this quickly. I think you've identified an area of significant risk for us, that we have opportunity to do this in a much better way than we're currently doing it. So I think you're correct. We currently collect around $3.4 billion a year. We actually will be asking for, in our new choice legislation we hope to work with you on, the ability to do this better. We right now are not allowed to require that veterans give us their other health insurance. So a lot of that gap right there is because we don't know their insurance numbers and we don't know their insurance company in which to collect it from. But we are looking at, and we have a RFP that will be released in the next couple weeks to be able to see whether the private sector can actually help us do collections better. And that is part of our pilot work that we're doing. We're actually using another federal agency to help us with these collections, and that does seem promising. So I can get you a more detailed answer, because I don't want to take up the time now, about the results of the pilot project.
Thank you very much, and I look forward to that.
Yes.
Mr. Secretary, your predecessor, Mr. McDonald, started an initiative known as MyVA to modernize and reorient the VA. The MyVA vision was to provide a seamless, unified veteran experience across the entire organization and throughout the country. In your testimony, you mentioned that you intend to modernize the VA as well. Can you tell us how your plan differs from Mr. McDonald's, and how you plan to, and whether or not you plan to build upon the MyVA? And can you also provide an update of the Veteran Integrated Service Network's realignment? That's the first part of the question. The other has to do with facility realignment. You mentioned a national infrastructure realignment strategy, and the last time VA made a major effort to study infrastructure needs was the Capital Asset Realignment for Enhanced Services, the CARES project. Do you envision that the department will embark on a similar effort, and if so, when will we still plan to invest and divest VA capital assets? Is the strategy that you plan to propose similar to the military-based realignment, the BRAC process?
Yeah, well, there's a lot there, Congressman, so I'll try to do this quickly. The MyVA program under Secretary McDonald, I think no doubt has the correct intent, which is to design a veteran-centric experience and to focus on that experience. And we know that there was significant and good improvement being done under that program because we could measure it. What I've said to the department is that one of the benefits of me having been in the department under Secretary McDonald is that I already know what was working. And I don't want to stop the progress that was being made. But I also don't believe we were making progress fast enough. So I'm looking to essentially continue the parts of that program that work, but I am seeking much broader, bolder transformation of this department because I think it's what's needed, and that's why I've set my 5 priorities forward. In terms of the VISN realignment, we used to have 21 VISNs. We're now down to 18. Whether 18 is the right number or not, I think we're always continuing to take a look at that. But we are going to change the role and function of the VISN from what it currently is, which is another layer of administrative complexity, some people may call that red tape, to a much more profound function in managing their local markets and moving towards this value-based purchasing concept and making sure that veterans get the best of care in the community and the best in VA care. So we're working on that transformation as we are building our choice program. The realignment, the CARES program, I wasn't here when that was implemented. I do know that we have closed 1,000 facilities, so that there has been progress made in that in the past. But I don't believe I've heard anybody with enthusiasm bringing back the CARES model. I think that we learned a lot of lessons in that. Whether the BRAC is a model that we should take a look at, we're beginning to have discussions with members of Congress about their suggestions. We do believe that we have, I know today, 431 vacant buildings and 735 underutilized buildings. And we want to stop supporting our use of maintenance of buildings that we don't need, and we want to reinvest that in the buildings that we know have capital needs. So we're going to be looking forward to working with you on that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you. Mr. Secretary, welcome, and thanks for the breakfast yesterday and the opportunity to engage you in conversation before this hearing. It has been my experience down through the years that organizations, particularly large organizations that find themselves in a bit of trouble, sometimes, and many times, stem from the fact that they get away from their core competencies and they expand into areas where they're not terribly knowledgeable, capable, and certainly not efficient. And they sometimes serve as kind of a weight, an albatross, if you will, around the neck of the organization, and it causes a lot of other things to be compromised in the process. And I suspect that the VA probably fits into this category. And so specifically, my question is this. You've spent some time talking about IT, which I am beginning to believe is not a core competency of the VA. We have had many indications that the construction of property is not, Aurora, Colorado being probably the poster child for it recently, not a core competency. And you talked about collections just a moment ago, and that would not necessarily be a core competency. So I'm going to throw this on the table and let you respond. Is it your intent as the Secretary of VA to protect the core competencies of the VA by outsourcing, for lack of a better term, some of the other things that have served to kind of bog down the system?
I think your assessment of what's happened in VA is probably pretty accurate. I think that we have learned the hard way and taken too long to make decisions in areas that, frankly, we just don't deserve to be in that business. And I think you've identified a few. My only modification, if you wouldn't mind, on the IT is I think IT has to be a competency of any organization nowadays. I mean, I can't imagine not. What we don't want to be doing is being in the software and product development business. But managing IT systems does need to be a competency of any successful company today, I believe. I don't know whether outsourcing is the right word. I do believe that if we're going to serve veterans, we need to be working with a core group of our employees and staff that functions on our core functions. But when we are when we strayed outside, building buildings, doing software development, doing claims and billing, I do think that we should be looking towards private sector solutions, or at the very minimum, private sector, private-public partnerships where we can get the competencies into the federal government.
The last question I have is that one of the problems facing the Congress and many previous Congresses is the fact that the entitlement programs that we know, the mandatory side of spending, continues to chew up available revenues and putting a lot of downward pressure on the discretionary piece of the budget. And that's getting worse and not better. And I think part of that is because, and this is good news, the people are living longer. They are receiving benefits from those systems for a lot longer period of time than actuarially they were expected to at the time. Do we have a pretty good handle on the number of people that will be entering the VA system so that we can right-size the funding request to ensure that we meet those needs and not play from a position of weakness by being behind? I've only got about 45 seconds left, but can you help me have confidence in knowing that we know what's going to be filling that pipeline, say, over the next generation?
We certainly have a handle on the demographics of the veteran population. As you know, we have 22 million veterans today, and that is expected to decline. What we can't predict is obviously new conflicts that would happen, because that can change the picture. What we can't predict is new science that would show that there is additional mandatory coverage that we would need to include as science shows that there is a connection between military service and some of the disabilities, and that work is always ongoing. So I think that we do have actuarial models in both healthcare, cemeteries, and benefits that we can share some of the parameters for needs, but they are not fully accurate because of the unknowns that are out there. So, but I think for what you're asking, we can share that with you.
Thank you for your service, and congratulations on your appointment. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Womack. I'd like to recognize Ms. Lee for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Good to see you, Mr. Secretary. I, too, want to congratulate you and just say I'm glad you're at the helm of the VA, and thank you for being here.
Thank you.
A couple of questions, and I'll try to ask them very quickly. One is relating to the Oakland VA Regional Office. In January of '64, the OIG found that there were significant delays, of course, in processing the claims, and the management didn't provide the oversight needed to ensure timely and accurate processing of informal claims. We had about 1,248 informal claims. Now, this was before the national work queue. Now, we're on the national work queue, and I'd like to find out, has this helped reduce the claims backlog significantly, and is it helping to streamline and reform benefit claims processing, specifically regarding the Oakland VA Regional Office? That's the first question. Second question has to do with what we have briefly discussed as it relates to minority veterans. I have looked at your health disparities report, which is a very thorough report. And of course, it cited the fact that minority veterans were diagnosed with PTSD at rates higher than white veterans. Also in the report, you go into some of the recommendations to begin to address not only PTSD in terms of its disparity, but all of the others. And it says that we need more research and more information. And I'm wondering, though, as it relates to this report and the recommendations, as it specifically relating health disparities with minority veterans, where are we on any of it? And are the recommendations being followed up? I can't help but wonder why more research would be needed. We have an Office of Minority Health over at HHS, and so I'm not sure if you're coordinating in terms of health disparities with Health and Human Services, just exactly what's going on, because this is, I think, a very good report, and I know many, many minority veterans who are really struggling with all of the issues around healthcare, especially PTSD. And finally, and I've asked this of the OIG and also when we were at the VA hospital, in terms of the utilization of minority and women-owned businesses. It's my understanding that you don't disaggregate the data. I'd like to find out how we're doing as it relates to African American, Hispanic, and Asian Pacific American Islander firms and companies, and I still haven't been able to drill down and get that report. The VA is a significant entity that contracts quite a bit of money out, and I'd like to find out how minority-owned contractors are faring, but we need to understand what the data is showing so that we can do better, because I've had a lot of complaints that from minority-owned businesses that they can't seem to penetrate and get into the system for a fair shot.
Okay. Well, thank you, Congresswoman Lee. These are all really important issues. So on the claims backlog and what the impact of the national workflow has been, we do believe that that's been helpful, and we are seeing improvements in productivity. I would like to get back to you, for the record, if it's okay, the impact from where you were measuring it at 1248 in Oakland and see where we are today so that we can track that progress together, because I think that's important. On the health disparities report, I agree with you. I think the work that our national center is doing has identified significant issues. This, of course, is an example where I think VA is actually leading and addressing issues that are important for all of the American public, and in healthcare we know that disparities is a very significant issue, particularly in many of our geographies across the country. I think VA is leading in this area, but we still have additional work to do, and we are treating this as a priority issue and looking at the recommendations you've talked about. The research that the report recommended, I think, is research on disparities in veterans. VA research has significant health services research components to it, and the difference between the health services research in VA and in HHS, like in the Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality, is our research is specific to veterans. And so we do believe that there are some questions that are important to ask in order to understand what the most effective interventions are. But I don't think that's a reason for us not to be implementing the other recommendations. There's important work to be done, and we are focused on this now.
Mr. Secretary, let me just comment on that, because I know the research is very important, but I know specifically, and when you look at African-American veterans with PTSD, you've got other factors that weigh in, and the Office of Minority Health could let you know what those external social determinants are that would really weigh in to help come up with treatment modalities that make more sense right away.
Yeah, I completely agree. The research research is only good if you act on it, and there are some things that we already know, and I think that this is where we are looking at this in terms of implementing the recommendations that we know need to happen, and it's a way that, frankly, VA can lead and help the rest of American healthcare also implement these interventions.
Do you have a working group that
we
you
do.
Put together?
Yes.
I'd like to talk to you a little bit more
Great,
about that.
great.
Thank you. Thank
and
you,
then,
Mr. Chairman.
and then on the small businesses, on the minority advantage, I don't know how that data can be essentially categorized to answer your questions. Let me please look into that and get back to you on that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thanks, good seeing you.
I'd like to recognize the gentleman from California, Mr. Valadao, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. As I'm sure you're aware, in 2002, the VA reinterpreted the language of the Agent Orange Act of 1991 to apply only to veterans who actually set foot in the Republic of Vietnam or served in the inland waterways of Vietnam, or brown water veterans. Veterans who served on ships or blue water veterans were not included and must prove service connection and exposure to Agent Orange. However, proven exposure to blue water for blue water veterans is nearly impossible due to a lack of record keeping and the inability to know the precise location of the dioxins, in this case Agent Orange, in the air or water runoff. The VA continues to deny claims for Brownwater Navy veterans despite studies showing higher rates of cancer and non-Hodgkin's lymphoma among shipboard veterans than those who fought on the ground in the country. This year, I introduced legislation to right this wrong, H.R. 299, the Blue Water Navy Veterans Act, which has over 270 bipartisan co-sponsors, including over half of this distinguished subcommittee. While I stand ready to work with my colleagues to pass this bill, the Department of Veterans Affairs has the power to right this wrong itself without the help of Congress. Have you been made aware of this issue since you have taken over as Secretary, and to your knowledge, is the VA working towards a solution on this issue?
Thank you for that question. Yes, I have been made aware of this issue. I would say 20% of my inbox is on this issue, so I hear from a lot of people. What I have done is I have actually sat down and I have met with some of the leaders in this Blue Water Navy movement to understand exactly what they believe the science shows and what they're recommending. Commander Wells is certainly one of them, John Rossi, another that I've recently met with in my office. They have followed up with additional information, which I really appreciated because I'm trying to bring myself up to speed on this. The VA's position on this has been pretty much the science isn't there. I'm not convinced that's the full story, and so I have asked them for additional information and additional recommendations so that, as you said, if the Department of Veteran Affairs has the ability, and I agree with you, to change some of these, and if the evidence suggests that that's the right thing to do for veterans, I am going to recommend that. So this is very active. I can tell you this week alone I've been reviewing additional studies. So I will be, certainly willing to engage in further conversation with you, and I am aware of your legislation.
Thank you, and I do appreciate the fact that you acknowledge that there is other science out there, because there are some studies out there that, especially with the way that they treat the water, clean the water, that actually says it concentrates the chemicals and makes the situation worse for those serving.
Yes.
And I appreciate you bringing that up. And then, Mr. Secretary, I also understand that the Air Force is conducting clinical human trials at Tinker Air Force Base to investigate transcranial magnetic resonance therapy, MERT, on veterans suffering from PTSD and TBI, traumatic brain injury. After 4 weeks of active treatment compared to the baseline, the treatment reduced an average PCLM score from 66 to 37. The Air Force concluded that the preliminary results suggest that MERT is a promising treatment modality to help veterans suffering from PTSD. With this information, can you please share with the committee what the VA is doing to capitalize on this promising new treatment to address PTSD in the veteran community?
Well, I'm very familiar with the MERT technology, and I'm very concerned about finding new therapies that help our veterans with PTSD as well as other conditions related to the brain. We do use, VA has extensive use already of transcranial magnetic stimulation. The issue is whether the MERT technology adds additional value to what we're currently using. I've recently, in the last 10 days, visited Walter Reed. I've talked to them about this. We're looking at the science. I would like to see the results of the Air Force studies as they're becoming aware, because basically, if there's evidence in science suggesting that this is helpful and effective, and especially a non-invasive technology, we absolutely want to be using it. Today, I am not aware of evidence that suggests that MERT adds advantages in terms of scientific advantages over the transcranial magnetic stimulation that VA and Walter Reed and others are using. And I have talked to my DoD colleagues. Now, with new information coming out of the Air Force, I'd be very open to seeing that.
All right. Well, thank you again. Thanks, Chairman.
Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Valdeo. At this time, I'd like to recognize the gentleman from West Virginia for 5 minutes, Mr. Jenkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, thank you also for the opportunity to visit with you in advance of this meeting to talk about your leadership and the direction, and I applaud your efforts. Let me start off with a word of compliment. I learned yesterday from the discussion with you about your push to provide transparency, quality data, information about wait times, our veteran satisfaction, patient satisfaction. And you shared with us the website accesstocare.va.gov.
Thank you for that plug.
And
Yes.
you didn't ask for this, but I give it to you.
Yeah.
But I did look after you made mention of this, and as I understand it from our discussion, this data has been out there, it's been available, but nobody was willing to authorize that the switch get flipped to make this available, and you did that.
Yes.
So thank you for doing that, and I encourage people to take a look. Transparency is good. The other, I want to make mention of this most recent executive order relating to some of the whistleblower and the accountability efforts. I can't tell you the number of times from whether it be a VA employee or others about frustration or concern. Maybe very briefly describe this executive order and what kind of reassurances to those on the ground at the grassroots feel as though their concerns, their voices are going to be heard about reforming the system and truly holding it accountable and holding people accountable for good, the need for good performance.
Well, I think that it's very important that people understand that we are taking these issues extremely seriously, that any organization that has been in trouble has to look towards its own leadership. And so we want to make sure that the people who are serving in our leadership positions are consistent and fulfilling the values that we owe our veterans. And so when we become aware of issues of poor performance or people that have strayed from those values, we are taking action. And I think you can see that there's been a large number of those actions taken recently. Because of that, we have established, the executive order has asked us to establish an accountability office that will report directly to me as the secretary. As part of that, we are putting our whistleblower office in that accountability office to make sure that our employees know that if they raise issues to us, and if they are legitimate issues, that those employees will be protected. We do not tolerate retaliation. And that's the way that we learn and get better as an organization, by addressing issues that are brought to our attention. So these two concepts of adhering to our values and protecting our employees that raise issues are absolutely essential to our success.
One area I'd like you to have staff look into, we get a number of calls to our office relating to the payment processes of the VA. You have described a effort to work collaboratively with academic health centers, local hospitals that have real connections to the VA, make 1 + 1 = 3, working together. But one of the challenges that I have heard, really starting with the restructuring of the payment system of the VA from June of 2015, and it continues today. I've got an academic medical center that really values and appreciates their good working relationship. The problem is the VA doesn't pay in a timely fashion. They've got literally hundreds of thousands of dollars in accounts receivable from their standpoint over 120 days. I've got a local hospital with over $10 million in accounts receivable from the VA over 120 days past due. So I'm not sure what's going on in the accounts payment and claims processing, but I think we've got some real timeliness issue, and I hope that that will be taken seriously.
Yeah, you have to understand that this is the world I came from, and I do believe if you deliver a service that you deserve to be paid, and you deserve to be paid timely. It's too hard operating those healthcare organizations to not get paid for the work that you're doing. So I absolutely believe we have to get better at that, and I am not being defensive about this. We are not doing a good enough job in that area. The way that I would suggest that we proceed is when you find a community hospital that thinks that they have $10 million that we owe, please let us know, because when we've dug into these, we absolutely owe them money, but it's usually not the 10 million. There are duplicate claims in there, there are rejected claims in there. Sometimes they're looking at charges instead of the fee schedule that we pay them. But we can work through that. We can put a team on that and get them the money that they deserve and get it to them quickly.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Secretary, for being here today. And look, we understand that there's nothing little about the big challenges that you face in your current position, so appreciate you for that. I just have, and I come from an area that has Hampton VA, which is fastest growing OIF, OEF, women's veterans populations there. Personally, I'm in the VA system myself as well. So this is something that I'm very passionate about, and I'm looking forward to working with you to figure out some of these challenges and fix them. Quick question for you. If one of us submits a question for your office, what is your policy in terms of the response? How many days?
Yeah, we categorize them into two types of responses. There are some that need urgent responses, and I think that we're shooting for that. I know I'm going to get this wrong because we just shortened the time frame to become more responsive. 14 days was our short one. And then is it 30 days for our longer one? So he says I got it right. So if there's something really urgent, we're going to do it in 14 days, otherwise 30 days. And I know that has not been the past experience from VA to your offices. This is our new commitment to respond to you in a more reasonably timely way.
Thank you. Let me touch on I have a bunch of questions, but let me touch on some of the most urgent ones. Suicide is obviously something that's just been talked about, something that's also dear. I have a friend that's committed suicide. We have these issues, of course, in our area. One of the things that I did submit to your office I haven't received yet is questioning the uniform policy, because I understand that the VA, according to the IG, of course, is sort of decentralized, if you will. Is there a uniform policy currently with people who are trained to intake folks who come up physically that either exhibit signs of suicide or say that they're suicide? And furthermore, is there a uniform policy for the crisis hotline, which I understand is also being manned by call centers? What is the uniform policy there, and what is the training that those folks at the call centers get?
Yeah, I have seen some communication. So are you saying we're over 30 days already?
Yes, Mr. Secretary.
Okay. Well, this is how I learned, so thank you. My guess is you'll be getting a response pretty soon. But I am aware of the issue that there was concern about a lack of consistency of training between suicide prevention coordinators that live in our medical centers and veterans crisis line responders who respond either from Atlanta or upstate New York. They are different professionals. Our veterans crisis line responders are licensed mental health professionals. They receive much more clinically intensive training. Our suicide prevention coordinators don't have to be that. They're doing different functions. Many of them came out of different disciplines. And so there are different trainings, but among those two categories, there should be consistency among veterans crisis line responders and suicide prevention coordinators. So we'll take a look for your correspondence to make sure we get you back a response very soon.
I appreciate that, Mr. Secretary. Also, just one other thing on suicide. Is there any openness to potential public-private type things with qualified nonprofits? So, for example, when I say that, there are a lot of veterans, of course, who are not comfortable with going to the VA, or not comfortable with walking up or calling, but may need help, but may feel more comfortable with some of the nonprofits out there that they themselves typically are manned by a lot of veterans as well, too, have gotten out and seen this problem firsthand. Is there any openness to sort of pilot program potentially for public privates to help with that?
Well, not only an openness, we think it's absolutely essential. There is no other way to do this. Of the 20 veterans a day that are taking their life by suicide, 14 of them do not get their care in the VA system, so they're out in the community. 6 are within the VA system. So if we don't reach out and do the types of partnerships that you're talking about and getting everybody involved, there is no way we can adequately address this. So we have been outreaching. We're working with Give an Hour, we're working with the Cohen Veterans Network, we're working with a lot of our VSOs on this. We have public service announcements. If you have groups, there's a new group I just reached out to called Headstrong, the Gallant organization. So if you have new partnerships you would like us to explore, we are absolutely open to this.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Can you, I'll have follow-up, I guess, in the next round, but just really quick, you had mentioned earlier that some of the underutilized buildings, I think there's 735, and then how many were vacant, you said?
435.
435. I'll hit you on the next round. Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you. This time I'd like to recognize the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Ryan, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Good to see you again. Appreciate our meeting yesterday. Let me just say publicly, I think what you are doing in your patient-centered care area with Tracy Gaudet is some of the most exciting stuff going on, not just in the VA, but in government today, of really figuring out quality solutions, integrating care, all the rest. I just want to say thank you for throwing your weight behind that. I think it's really, really important, and I think we're going to start seeing a lot of savings because of that and healing a lot of vets. So I want to say thank you right out of the gate. In our conversations that we've had already, I appreciate the balance that you're trying to strike between the VA clinics and the choice program, and I know that's not always easy. One problem area that we've become aware of in my office is that despite the choice program being authorized and appropriated, we still have veterans traveling significant distances to try to get their care. And if a veteran has a clinic within 40 miles, but the clinic doesn't offer the services they need, the veteran is being told they are ineligible for the choice program and being referred to the nearest VA clinic with the services offered. There appears to be no policy that places a cap on the distance the veteran would have to travel if they fall into this loophole. And in my district, which includes veterans in Warren, Ohio, traveling 3 to 4 hours to a round trip weekly, sometimes more than once a week, to receive treatment in Cleveland. And I was at my son's little soccer practice, and I had a couple vets at the same time grab me about this issue. The primary care physician or primary coordinator of benefits has independent authority to assign a veteran to travel an extreme distance with no limit established by the VA, or they can refer them in the community of care to a local doctor, or they can elect to refer them to choice. However, it requires a justification that there's an excessive burden on the veteran. And you mentioned in your testimony establishing a priority on transparency. However, I can't find, and my staff can't find, a readily issued pamphlet, flyer, or billboard which would explain to our veterans what defines a burden that would make them eligible for choice in this particular situation. I've co-sponsored legislation with Representative Stefanik and Dr. Ruiz to correct this issue. So my question to you is, do you have the authorities you would need to fix the problem? And what can we do quickly, instantly, to provide more transparency and enroll our vets in the decisions for their care? And if we can't fix it immediately, is there a legislative issue that we need to deal with? And I guess lastly and more comprehensively, will the Choice 2.0 consolidation with community care correct this problem?
Yeah, well, lots of important questions that you have in that. So in designing a healthcare system, I would not necessarily have picked mileage and wait time as my criteria for how to design the system. I understand why Congress did, and you know, frankly, to put a national program up so quickly, I think it was a very well thought out effort that Congress had. But now that we have had time to experience this, I believe a healthcare system should have a clinical basis to the way it's designed. So it is my intent in working with you to present an alternative to 40 miles in 30 days, in other words, to eliminate that, and to replace it with something that makes sense from a veteran's clinical needs. So to look at access and clinical quality as the alternative to geography and wait time. Under the current system that we have, which is still having to follow the rules that was set by Congress, 40 miles in 30 days, we do, as you correctly said, have the ability to define excessive burden. What we found, quite frankly, right after I became secretary, was that we had put out 5 sort of bullet points about examples of excessive burden. the field had interpreted that as those were the only exceptions that they could use. We've now clarified that. What we're trying to do is to get the veteran and their doctor or their provider to have an interaction about what excessive burden is. And we've now loosened up the requirements so that the field can make reasonable judgments about excessive burden, because some of the examples like the ones you're giving really aren't acceptable.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
This time I'd like to recognize the gentleman from Nebraska for 5 minutes, Mr. Fortenberry, Vice Chairman of the Subcommittee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary, welcome.
Thank you.
Are you enjoying the new job?
Yes, thank you.
Well, apparently you are, and I'm grateful for your projection of an attitude of entrepreneurship and innovation, as well as compassion for this essential mission. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
I appreciate that. In your opening statement, you also referenced the new idea that has emerged that has now been empowered by legislation of a unique public-private partnership that is going to happen in Omaha. I want to unpack that a little bit more for the committee, just so that everyone understands how potentially transformative this could be. The community wanted to go on the point. Community leadership came to congressional leadership and said, you know, we've built housing for veterans, we've built housing for troops. Could we possibly participate through some charitable entity in updating and upgrading the hospital there, which is in serious need of not only a facelift, but serious innovation, modernization. So working with my predecessor, Congressman Brad Ashford, we got the empowering legislation to you. The community has committed about $30 million to build upon the money that had been set aside for a new hospital, about over $50 million. And we're going to move forward. I think it's exactly the model of what you're talking about in terms of creating the 21st century architecture for a modern VA that is looking to community resources when available to go not just into looking for charitable funds for donation purposes, but an integrated service environment, as you referenced earlier. This new facility will be an add-on to the existing hospital, ambulatory care facility, be proximate to Creighton Med School, as well as the University of Nebraska Med School, who you already work with. So the synergies there designed will become a bit seamless, or as we say, the veteran won't know the distinction between the type of care that they're getting. They're just getting the best possible care under VA auspices, using private sector resources, charitable monies that have gone into the clinic, because that's the objective. So I wanted to spend a little time just unpacking that further, and hopefully, given the very difficult, sad experiences we've had with watching burgeoning cost overruns, the Denver hospital being the poster child, that this way of proceeding forward is undoubtedly going to tap into a large pool of goodwill that exists out there in the country among charitable organizations and leadership in various communities to want to assist you in modernizing, innovating, and creating the types of partnerships that utilize the best of the private sector, but always under VA's auspices. So I'm excited by this, and I'm sorry to spend so much time on it if you want to comment on that. I also want to mention 50 miles down the road in Lincoln, we have a traditional, beautiful campus for a VA clinic. Similar type of dynamic is occurring where a charitable foundation with the city has agreed to build out veterans housing on the site of the old clinic. We're awaiting the decision as to what's going to happen with the new clinic, so if you could give us some update on that process, that would be helpful. But again, once again, the synergies being created with existing facilities, preserving traditional, beautiful architecture in proximity to the city's own private sector medical resources, again, is a new opening dynamic of what I hope is a new chapter of the VA. Third point, right quick, I've become aware and a little bit involved with a charitable organization called Project Hero. Your Undersecretary, Dr. Poonam Ale, has given a memorandum of understanding to your VA directors that they can partner with this organization using recreational activity, bicycling primarily, to be integrated into VA's services. Studies there's metrics on this already showing improved healthcare outcomes, lower cost, sense of well-being, drops in suicide. A study comes out of Georgetown. Again, I just wanted to highlight that for you because I think this is one of those types of programs, consistent with what I said earlier. It's been developed because of compassion and initiative by the private sector looking to partner with the VA, and we've got great opportunity here.
Right. Well, thank you. I think just briefly on your 3 points, the project in Omaha, Nebraska is exactly what I think we're looking to do in the VA, which is do things differently. In this case, we're going to build a new facility. It's going to be good for veterans and absolutely good for taxpayers. This is going to leverage the federal dollars in ways that in the past we wouldn't have been able to do before. And if it really wasn't for your leadership and support in getting this through legislatively and the whole way through, it wouldn't be happening. So I think this is a transformative model. We have 4 other sites that you authorized after Omaha, Nebraska that we can do. So I'm hoping that other committee members are listening because we have a list of 20 sites that now are eligible for this. I think this should become the way that we build a future modern healthcare system. So thank you for your leadership again on that. Secondly, on Lincoln, absolutely, we are moving forward with a new clinic there. It should be awarded this fall, and through the whole build and design process, even though I pushed really hard, probably the opening date is going to be in early 2020. So it takes a while to do this, but that is well underway, and it's really towards the top of our list. On your third point about Project Hero, you know, one of the great things about VA is that it defines healthcare much broader than just physical illness. It defines it as physical, psychological, social, economic, and an example of using sports and adaptive sports to help people get better and have a sense of well-being is something that, frankly, VA taught me a lot about. And this is a great example. And so we are very supportive of this and other work around the country like this. And thank you for bringing this to our attention.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fortenberry. This time we'll move into our second round of questionings, and I'll start. Dr. Shulkin, in the one-page FY18 skinny budget we received in March, there's a VA request for $2.9 billion in new mandatory funding, presumably to complete the FY18 funding for the Choice Program after the mandatory $10 billion for the program is completely exhausted in January, I guess. Does this indicate the administration's intent to fund the Successor Choice Program out of mandatory funding?
Yes.
Okay. Next question. Being an appropriator, I've always tried to keep my eye on the bottom line of new initiatives. I'm aware of at least 2 proposals. While we certainly support them from a policy perspective, and we send out our budget antennas on alert, you've announced that you intend to provide emergency health services to veterans who have other than honorable discharges. You've also testified in the Senate that you're interested in expanding caregiver assistance to veterans from before the post 9/11 era. How do you plan to fit these added costs into your budget when you're obviously already struggling to cover expenses for your current VA patients?
Chairman, you know, maybe this doesn't fit into the budget, but basically I don't care. I sat in a session that was organized by members of Congress, members of the House, where there was a young man who sat right in the Capitol Rotunda who said that he had been deployed to Afghanistan 6 times, and on his return, he found out that his wife left him, and so he took off across the country to try to find her. He was declared AWOL and other than honorable. You could see he was suffering from severe mental and emotional disorders, and he went to a VA, and he shows up at a VA and says, "I'm here because I need help. I'm suicidal." And the VA says, "I'm sorry, you're not a veteran." Well, he had served our country 6 times, 6 tours. That's just not acceptable. When we say that there are 20 veterans taking their life every day, we know it's this group that is among the highest. No one wants to help them. Well, I'm not just going to sit by. So I don't want more money for this. We're going to find a way to help these people and then connect them in the community resources and get them help, because that's the right thing to do. So I'm going to find the way to do that. because I think this is our
That's a very
this is our
compelling
priority.
story, and I'm glad you're taking that initiative.
And I'm sorry, Chairman, what was your other question?
No, that was, that,
Okay.
caregiver, sorry.
Caregivers, yes. So the caregivers program is really, really important. We were authorized to be able to do that for post 9/11 veterans, and there's been tremendous successes. But we, frankly, didn't get this program right. We have been issuing, in some areas, up to 90% revocations of caregivers that we had authorized. Something's wrong there. So we just issued a national suspension of revoking caregiver status. And we're now in a pause where we're going to look at what are the right policies in order for veterans to get access to caregivers. It is our intent to be able to bring this to pre-9/11 caregivers, because frankly, the most vulnerable group right now are our elderly veterans. And the worst situation is when somebody's in their home and they have to leave their home to go to an institution, a nursing home. Because one is, most veterans don't want that. Most people don't want that. And secondly, it's the most expensive way to care for elderly people. If we can keep them in their home with caregivers, we should be doing that. So we're looking at how do we use the current money and potentially come up with even better policy than what we have today. And we're going to be announcing that in probably the next couple months.
Thank you. The VA's antiquated scheduling system has been a particular concern to you, I know. We understand you're on a dual track to modernize it, piloting a commercial system, mass, as well as upgrading your existing system, I guess called VSE. It seems like these efforts might lack a unified strategy. Why are you interested in investing in two systems simultaneously, and will the scheduling system be further tinkered with in the electronic record overhaul?
Yeah. On the surface, I agree with you. This makes no sense at all. Why would you invest in two different paths? We awarded a commercial off-the-shelf product called MASS. That is the system that we think meets our solutions, and that's the one that we're implementing. We're working right now on a pilot site to be able to create the interfaces so that we can do that. The rollout of that across a system as big as ours is going to take several years. In the meantime, we had developed an internal system, one of the, frankly, last I hope that we ever developed, but this one is developed already with taxpayer dollars. And we did an evaluation in the month of February. We had rolled it out to 8 sites. It's actually working. It is much better than what we have right now. So as an intermediate stopgap measure, we're rolling it out across the country because it's already been developed, and it will help in that intermediate period of time till we can get a commercial off-the-shelf system up.
Thank you, Secretary Shulkin. This time I'd like to recognize the ranking member for 5 minutes in the second round.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to focus on military quality of life because at that hearing that we had in March, and we had an opportunity to meet with the senior commissioned officers, we discussed the Marines United scandal, which we discussed in my office yesterday. Many of the victims of that really horrific social media site are now veterans. And I've met with a number of them, as have many of the women members. And I would like to know what the VA is doing to provide them with the necessary care and support they need, because these are women who have had, without their permission, nude photos of themselves posted. They've been subject to extreme humiliation. With regard to the military sexual trauma system that the VA has, how have you let veterans know that this service is available, and what outreach have you had?
The VA has an extensive system for treating military sexual trauma. We actually have worked with the Department of Defense so that the VA is a place where people can go confidentially and get treatment. Women or men who have suffered military sexual trauma can come into any of our vet centers, and there will not be a connection of their medical record back to the Department of Defense.
Secretary, and I appreciate that.
Yeah.
But specifically, what kinds of outreach are you doing to not only make sure that victims of sexual assault in the military are aware of those services, but also specifically the victims of the Marines United scandal.
Right. When we met in your office, you actually suggested that that's something we should be doing. I don't believe that we have done that. I agree with you. It's something we should be doing. And so as a result of our conversation, we are putting together a plan for that specific outreach. So thank you for that suggestion.
Okay, no, you're welcome. I mean, we have
Yeah.
female veterans that are committing suicide at a rate of 6 times that of women women civilians, and identifying ways and implementing strategies to address the unique mental health needs of women is critically important. And so I would appreciate it if you and your
Yes.
staff would follow up with us on that. The other question that I wanted to touch base on is what I mentioned in my opening remarks, and that's the openings, the really significant and serious openings that you have in all of your Senate-confirmed positions. And you mentioned that you were going to be making an adjustment in how you fill those positions. But I'm actually wondering, one, if there are any problems that the administration is facing in identifying candidates for those positions. Are you having trouble filling them? And in particular, I find it extremely troubling that the Undersecretary for Health, the Assistant Secretary for Information and Technology, given the very serious problems we've talked about here today, and the Chairman of the Board of Veterans Appeals are all positions that remain empty. What is the timeline for filling those, and do you have candidates that you're considering, and are you having trouble filling them?
Well, I appreciate your concern about that. I'm very impatient, and of course, I want my team in place. We have obviously very good career acting professionals that are handling these right now, but I want permanent people in place. The Undersecretary for Health and the Undersecretary for Benefits, I'm not sure if you're aware, it's mandated that we form commissions to actually search for those positions. The Undersecretary for Benefits Commission met approximately 10 days ago to go through candidates and are recommending several of them for me to see and then me to recommend to the President. And the Undersecretary for Health Commission, I just saw the committee members appointed this morning. That will be going forward in the next probably 2 weeks as well. For CIO, I've met a number of candidates. We're vetting them right now, trying to move forward with an offer. And at the Board of Veteran Appeals, we're also trying to vet a candidate also. So I hope that, these processes, having gone through it myself, my own vetting process, 13 months, it takes too long. And we're looking to move through this as soon as we possibly can.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll have one in the third round, so I appreciate it. Yield back.
Thank you. This time I'd like to recognize the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Rooney, for 5 minutes.
Thank you. And Mr. Secretary, I just want to say that your office, I guess, is watching this hearing and has already gotten with my office regarding some of the issues that we were discussing with our constituents. And I want to give a shout out to Mary Kay in Lake City. And if you're still watching Mary Kay, I have another issue for you to work on. That is with regard to, a lot of my district is very rural, and I do have some of the coast, but a lot of the people that live in my district live in the countryside. And one of the issues they complain with the choice program is that there's long wait times. They're receiving complaints about long wait times for VA appointments, referrals, payments through the choice program, and the payment and reimbursement process to the providers is difficult, probably exacerbated because it is rural. So we have, obviously in that situation, you have smaller hospitals and clinics. And many of the providers that are technically participating in the choice program are refusing to accept choice patients because they know that they'll have to wait a long time to get paid themselves. So some providers that don't accept the choice patients will only do so if the veteran agrees to pay for the services up front, and that leaves the veterans in that same bind they were in before choice, which was either face the excessive wait times at the VA facility with no option to obtain immediate care elsewhere without paying out of pocket first. And obviously that's not the point, or that's not what we're looking to do. So, I mean, you as a doctor can probably appreciate, you know, with these people that want to take the choice program and help veterans, but they know that it's going to take forever to get reimbursed, be like, hey, will you pay me first, and then, you know, we'll deal with getting reimbursed later. I don't know if that's the rationale, but it sounds like that. The OIG has criticized the VA's monitoring and oversight for these contracts and reported that these contracts still don't have performance measures to ensure that contractors pay their providers in a timely manner. And the OIG made this recommendation January 30th of this year. So as you work to expand the choice program, how are you implementing the OIG's recommendations specifically with regard to timely reimbursements?
Well, there is no doubt that this is an area of significant risk for us, that monitoring and making sure that the providers are paid is critical because of the issues that you're saying. The veterans are being put in the middle. I would not recommend that veterans put out money for this. That is, as you said, is not the point of it. What we have done is we have done multiple contract modifications. We've actually advanced money to the third-party administrators. I've suspended the requirement that providers have to provide their medical records to us in order to get paid. We are improving our payment cycles through the choice program, but it's not perfect by any means. We have to get better at our auditing of these processes, and those were the IG recommendations, and we are working on doing that. So this is a significant area of risk for us. In the reauthorization or the redesign of the choice program, what we're calling Choice 2.0, we want to eliminate the complexity of this process. The private sector does not have to do the type of adjudication of claims that we do. They do auto adjudication. They do electronic claims payments. We just are not able to, under this legislation, do all the things that, frankly, we know are best practices. That's what we want to get right in Choice 2.0.
Thank you. This time I'd like to recognize the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Ryan, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's nice of all you Pennsylvania guys to let an Ohio guy participate in this hearing. I appreciate that.
We beat Ohio State last year, that's why.
Blind squirrel finds a nut every now and again, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, a couple of quick questions. One, with regard to the choice program again, there are a lot of people who want to access, and I've seen it in the last few years at the DC VA and other VAs where you have centers of excellence where there are all these complementary services that are being provided that are showing significant success in reducing pain, managing pain, reducing opiates, which is a huge thing for us to be able to do, providing these alternative approaches. And I just want to make sure as we're moving to try to better administer the choice program, that these evidence-based programs are covered in the choice program so that they can access, whether it's acupuncture or mindfulness-based stress reduction. I've seen programs like Project Welcome Home Troops, where they do a lot of breathing exercises with these veterans that are having transformative effects with their post-traumatic stress. Transcendental meditation is another one that they use. There are a lot of videos online you can watch where these vets are on 10 or 12 prescription drugs after going through some of these therapies that aren't traditional, I guess you would say, going down to 2 or 3 meds, which is a huge savings for us. And you're actually giving these vets the tools they need to be able to go out into the world and function and get a job and be productive members of our society. So I want to make sure as we move with the choice program that these, again, evidence-based programs are covered by the choice program.
Yes, those types of services and providers are part of the choice program. We are expanding the network so that we have more access to those types of providers.
Great. I think that's going to be a big thing, not just for the vets, but out in society as well. The other issue is we're talking about dealing with the appeals process. We had this conversation again yesterday. But the legislation currently is not going to affect the hundreds of thousands, almost 500,000 people who are already caught up in the stagnant appeals process. So I say this not to you because I've already said it to you, but to members of the committee and to the public. I think it's important for us to figure out how we can help you start to reduce this backlog. How do we get more appeals judges, maybe out of retirement, to get into this program? Congressman Womack and I are already working on some legislation to be able to do that. And so if your department can provide us with the necessary metrics that we would need to figure out how many retired appeals judges from the Board of Appeals do we need to get back in the system, even on a part-time basis, to start getting through this backlog. And so if you could make sure you get us that
I appreciate
information.
that suggestion. 470,000 backlog claims right now. So even after legislation's passed and we fix the process going forward, we still have that backlog. I appreciate your offer to work with us and see if there's a way to help with that. And we have already worked up some numbers we'd be glad to share with you and Congressman Womack.
Great. Mr. Chairman, I think that's an important step for us to try to dig into this 470,000 numbers with the appeals that some of them are 30 years in the making. And for every additional piece of evidence or paperwork they add, it just slows up the process. And I think we've got to make a concerted effort. Congressman Womack, I won't steal his term, but was talking about a surge for judges to help dig through this. So thank you again, Mr. Secretary, for all your leadership. We appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Taylor from Virginia is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, thanks again. Appreciate it. This has been a great day. I know that you mentioned that the demand was not fully funded, and then I know that you're looking for efficiencies and waste, fraud, and abuse and all those things, and I'd like to just briefly touch on that. First, I want to applaud you for taking the stand and helping veterans that may have been dishonorably discharged, and some of that because of effects and stresses that they had on their own personal lives and everything from war, quite frankly. That being said, even in our own VA, when we walked through it and we noticed and asked questions and certainly saw that there were folks that were being treated there that may not be eligible via the system currently. So, and a couple areas of Hampton, and it's in my letter, and to your office as well too, or email, I think it is. It talks about how there are a couple areas there where you have these veterans that are honorable veterans, no issue, but when they need a knee replacement or something like that, that's not service connected, that they're not eligible for, that they may be getting treatment there in the VA. That's a huge cost with zero reimbursements potentially from Medicare, Medicaid, or their private insurer, or whatever that might be. So one of the things that we sent in there, and I don't know if there's an active study for it now, is if you exacerbate that across the whole VA system, that's significant dollars. And veterans, either knowingly or not knowingly, because this is not a politically popular thing to say, but I'm a veteran and I don't care. If you know that you're not supposed to be treated there, then you don't get treated there because you're taking away from other veterans that should be treated. That being said, we want to take care of people as much as possible, but I'm fearful that in the political climate that maybe the VA's seeing folks that aren't supposed to be there, that should be using their own private insurer or whatever they're on insurance-wise. So has there been any studies or looking into that to figure out what that is costing the VA across the whole system?
Yeah. We absolutely have looked at this. As you know, veterans are classified in 8 priority groups. The first 3 generally are service-connected. The next 3, so 4 through 6, are generally income-related, low income. So when you start getting to 7 and 8s, those are people that fall outside of that, and currently that is frozen. So not all veterans, as you're saying, are eligible for care in the VA system. And so we are focusing on those that are service-connected and lower income. So, and I think that's a...
If I may.
Yes.
Has there been any review, if you will, where that may not be the case? That I know that we're focused on the folks that are supposed to be in the system, that need care and everything like that. But has there been a review across the whole spectrum to figure out, in fact, if they're not? I'm not trying to say it's fraud necessarily, maybe, but in some instances it may not be. They just may not know otherwise. But have we had a report across the system to figure out those inefficiencies and what those costs are for the VA?
Yeah, we know exactly how many people are in each of these priority groups, and
Not the priority groups. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah.
But not the priority groups, but I mean folks that aren't supposed to be getting care that are getting treated.
well, I'm not aware of any veterans that are getting care there that shouldn't be. If they are, then we have to address that and stop that, because we do check, except in emergency care, eligibility criteria when people come in. And if they're not eligible for care, we generally are telling them that. Now, maybe you're aware of some situations, and I'd really like to understand that better, because I think you're correct in your assumption that our care needs to be focused on those that are eligible for care, particularly when we have access issues. So I'd be glad to talk to you more about that. I do want to just mention two things. First of all, our policy is for emergency mental health care for other than honorable, not dishonorably discharged. Dishonorably discharged, we're not.
Sorry if I misspoke. But,
okay.
But I do applaud you for
I
those
just wanted to
efforts, because I
clarify
know that there are a lot of wounds that are mental, of course, and
Absolutely.
I get that. I applaud you for those efforts.
And the other thing I just want to mention is that your letter of March 29th, we did respond by April 6th, so we actually made it in that 14 days. There is additional information that your office wants on the protocols on the Veterans Crisis Line, so we're providing that to you and certainly want to get you that detail.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. At this time, I guess we'll move into a third round of questioning for those who remain. So with that, I thought I'd just quickly touch on a couple issues. First, Mr. Secretary, as you know, we included $50 million in the omnibus appropriations bill that's going to be considered on the floor, I guess right now, for VA opioid abuse prevention and treatment efforts. We realize that the VA has, really come a long way in opioid management efforts since the horror stories of Toma, Wisconsin, in the Candyland doctor situation. What are the most effective approaches VA has identified to keep severely injured veterans away from opioid dependency, and how are you channeling your funding to achieve those goals?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for that additional support. I can tell you it is money worth spent. We have seen a 32% reduction in opioid use in the VA since 2010, but we have a lot more work to do, so this is really a good investment. I'd say very briefly, the VA approach to this, and we are leading American medicine in this, I just published an article on this, is a multifaceted approach. One is veterans need to sign an informed consent when they go into opioids. Secondly, we actually monitor the profile of doctors so they can compare themselves to how other doctors are prescribing. Third, we mandate participation in the state prescription data monitoring programs. Fourth, we do academic detailing where experts go out and actually educate our clinicians on this. And fifth, we are suggesting strong alternatives to opioids and providing those like complementary or integrative medicine in our facilities.
I'd also like to ask you too, as it relates to disability claims backlog management issue. We were pleased to learn last year that the VA had reached an effective zero on the size of the disability claims backlog. And I know some claims are always going to be or exceed the target deadline because the VA is waiting for the veteran to produce some additional information. But you bring that number down, I guess, from its peak of 611,000 in 2013. But we understand the backlog is creeping back up because of your shift in workload priority from initial claims to appeal cases. We know that the burgeoning appeals caseload needs to be tackled, but this highlights the management dilemma you face. I think Congressman Ryan touched on that a bit. But what is your long-term plan to bring a balance between activity on initial claims and appeals workloads? That's the main issue I guess I want to hear about today.
Well, I don't think we are where we want to be on this. So we have to make continued progress. We're at 100,000 disability claims over 125 days, and that needs to come down significantly. We're doing a number of changes to our processes. One's called decision-ready claims. That will allow a veteran to seek a much quicker resolution to their disability claims and give them a choice when they have all their information available to be able to do that. We're still advancing our technologies, moving towards a paperless system. We have 10 sites now that are completely paperless. That moves everything through faster. We're looking at a number of other alternatives to do that. So we do have plans to get this down, and we're not seeking additional funds to do that. We see it through process improvements.
Thank you. Finally, Jared Kushner's White House Office of American Innovation has apparently chosen the VA as its first target to reshape federal bureaucracy by making it leaner and more effective. Has his office fanned out staff to VA to analyze its operations and make suggestions at this point?
Yeah, we're in close contact with Mr. Kushner's office. They have been extraordinarily generous with their time, and what they've really been doing is trying to bring industry partners and industry best practices in to help the VA. So I don't think that they're staffed to come in and do their own assessments, nor do I think that's their intent. It's more to identify solutions that already exist in the private sector and bring them in and modernize our system.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And all federal agencies, by the way, have received an executive order to reorganize the departments by September in line with their FY18 budget cost-cutting proposals. Your acting deputy has said that the VA would like to get started sooner than that. What changes do you expect in the way VA is organized and how it operates before the end of the year?
Well, we are underway with this right now. I think although I don't know all the specific solutions because we're still working on it, I think what you should expect is that we're looking to have a smaller central office function, more streamlined. We're looking to move towards more shared services rather than siloed services in each of our administrations. And we're actually looking across federal agencies to see, are there things that maybe other agencies are doing better that they should be doing for us, or vice versa, whether VA should be taking on some of the functions that other agencies are doing. We're working with other secretaries on that.
Well, thank you, Secretary. That completes my questioning, and I'll, at this time I'll recognize the ranking member for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to just ask you about the Veterans Crisis Line because when we went to the D.C. VA hospital, we had a rather confusing conversation with their personnel that made it evident that there were a number of serious issues with the decentralized nature of the Veterans Crisis Lines, there being a national hotline as well as a hotline at each hospital. And so the IG's report that came out highlighted how significant the concerns are, and within days of the IG's report, the VA said that the issue had been fixed. Can you explain how fixed it is, and what does that mean, and what you're doing to ensure that our veterans are absolutely able, when they are in crisis, because of the risk of suicide being so high, are able to get the services that they need?
I apologize for the confusion. There is only one centralized Veterans Crisis Line. Each of the medical centers do not have decentralized crisis lines. What the IG was referring to was the fact that when the VA responders in the Veterans Crisis Line received more calls than they could handle, they went to backup centers that were located around the country. Those backup centers are certified SAMHSA backup centers, so they're trained responders as well, but they're not VA responders. We did not think that was satisfactory. So several months ago, we went out, we hired over 200 new responders, had to get them trained. They came online in the early part of 2017. We opened up a second center in Atlanta, Georgia. And now, because of these new responders in the second center that's online, we are able to handle the calls that are coming in. We have less than a 1% backup center rollover rate at this point. That's why we came out and said that we fixed that problem. We have many days where we have 0 rollover calls. Probably in the last 2 months, we average, less than 10 rollover calls on a given day. We are responding to over 2,000 calls a day to veterans in crisis. We typically will send out 60 to 65 emergency responses to save veterans' lives.
When we were at the VA hospital here, they described a system that was one that was based with their personnel and one that kicked to the national system when it was after hours.
Well, every VA has a mental health service. We have same-day services available, so if a veteran calls and is in crisis, they will be seen that day or their issue will be dealt with that day. So that does happen. Every one of our medical centers has a suicide prevention coordinator, many of them more than one, that is there to deal specifically with the follow-up issues and to address people in crisis in that day. But there's only one national veteran crisis line, and that's run out of 2 locations in upstate New York and 1 in Atlanta.
Do they all receive the same training?
They all receive, well, as I was explaining to the congressman, the Veterans Crisis Line responders all receive the same training because they are licensed healthcare professionals, and the suicide prevention coordinators all receive the same training, but different training than the Veterans Crisis Line responders because they're not all credentialed or licensed mental health professionals.
Okay, and then you mentioned the reorganization and Jared Kushner's office's goals. Are those goals aligned with yours? Are you waiting for Mr. Kushner's reorganization recommendations before you begin hiring?
No. The American Innovation Office is not intended to come in and do assessments and give recommendations. That's the executive order has asked the department to do that, so that's what we're doing. Mr. Kushner's office is helping us in identifying industry best practices and strategic partners that can help us advance these modernization goals.
Okay, and then just as I run out of time, on the Board of Veterans Appeals and the backlog and the issue of the disability assessment backlogs as well, are you aware of online electronic technology that exists that previously had contracts with the VA that no longer do, and that could significantly address some of this backlog?
No.
Okay, I'd like to follow up with your office so that you can be aware of this technology. And while I have no preference for any particular contractors, the timeline and story that I have heard about the process that they have gone through leaves me frustrated that we have a massive backlog and a potential avenue to help address it, but no way in for a contractor like them to actually be a part of it.
No, thank you. I'd like to hear about that.
Thank you. I yield back.
This time I'd like to recognize a gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just wanted to say before I give my question, you're correct. We have the letter. I have it right here. So maybe I misspoke in terms of, getting the answers.
Right.
Yes, you responded. So the office responded.
I'm just glad we responded.
Sure, thanks. I look forward to working with you on those. Continue with the budget, and I know, like I said, I understand that you're looking for efficiencies. And you mentioned earlier about 32% of the care being outside of the walls of the VA, which is a 62% increase in 2 years, right? So what is your office doing in terms of looking at inside and figuring out, yes, if we're looking at, and you're asking for the monies for the choice and to fully fund that in the mandatory in the budget, that trajectory is pretty high, right? So what are we looking internally in terms of reducing the budget internally? If the care is being seen there, or are you just seeing complete demand exploding?
Yeah, I think the reason why we got into the crisis in 2014 is because we were not being honest about what the real demand is. And once we opened up both internal access and community access, we started to see what the real demand is. So I think that we're reaching, I believe, hope to be reaching a steady state where we're not going to see continued growth in the way that we have in the past, but that we are meeting the healthcare needs of our veterans and honoring our commitment.
Okay, thank you. And the back to the 735 underutilized and 435 vacant buildings that are out there. Do you have a rough idea of what the cost is that you guys are spending that you don't need to per year on that?
Yeah, and in fact, I have a chart that I gave each of you showing you where these are. But the cost of the 435 buildings right now that are vacant is $6.7 million a year. Our total cost is approximately $25 million a year for all these buildings.
Thank you. And then jumping back, and I appreciate that, thank you. Jumping back to the suicide, and you mentioned the two different folks that are trained in suicide. So it's my understanding that, like Hampton, for example, Hampton VA, there's a call center that mans the suicide prevention hotline, or the suicide hotline. Is that correct?
No, the suicide hotline is a national hotline. During business hours, the Hampton VA would be there to assist veterans in crisis. The national hotline is run out of our upstate New York office, and now in Atlanta they have a second office.
So I was in a contractor's office as well too, and they said that they were the call center for the Hampton VA.
I'm sorry. The VAs and in some cases the VISNs run a call center. Mm-hmm. They do not run the crisis line. They run regular calls that come in and want to be, ask for appointments or get to certain places through a telephone operator. We do run call centers across the country, but we only have 1-800 number for our Veterans Crisis Line, and that's run out of upstate New York and Atlanta.
So that the veterans, I'm just trying to understand.
Yes.
So the Veterans Crisis Line, but if I call the Hampton number and say I'm suicidal.
Right. It will say dial 7, right? Call the Hampton VA. What it will say is welcome, and if you're having issues related to suicidal ideation, they use better words than that, please dial 7. You'll automatically be connected to our National Veterans Crisis Line.
Okay. Thank you. And I have no further questions. I look forward to working with you. Thanks for your time.
Thanks.
Mr. Chairman? Sure. I thank you. I really think that if we're having a hard time understanding how the Veterans Crisis Line works, then imagine how veterans must feel. I don't think it's clear how it works and what happens from beginning to end every hour of every day. I think I'm glad that you have an additional, service center that has your employees staffing it, but I don't understand the difference between who handles suicide calls on the Veterans Crisis Line and other mental health calls. I don't understand how it works when you're outside of business hours. I am confident that there are different crisis lines that are at local VA hospitals, because we were told that they had people working at the DC Veterans Hospital that handled that, and that it only went to the Veterans Crisis Line when they weren't open. So if you could provide greater clarity, that would be helpful.
This wouldn't be the first time that I've learned information that then I would agree with you. I'd be confused too. I think I have an understanding that's clear, but please, let's make sure that it's the correct understanding, and I do want this to be clear. There should be no doubt how a veteran gets help when they're in crisis, and obviously, if we're not communicating that well enough, or if there's a system that I don't understand, I appreciate you raising that, and I'll get back to you on this.
Thank you, especially because we have lives at stake.
Of course.
Thank you very much.
Thank the ranking member. At this time, I'd like to recognize Mr. Fortenberry for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you again, Mr. Secretary, for listening to me earlier and of course, embracing the transformative ideas, what I believe and you believe to be our transformative ideas that are kicking off in Omaha. And in this regard as well, Congressman Taylor actually touched on the question, and others have as well. But back to the idea of excess inventory. For instance, the Air Force is going to come here shortly and tell us they carry 30% excess inventory. And while yours is, in terms of cost impact, much, much lower, nonetheless, That's not a good use of dollars. Now, we throw around the word BRAC. I highly suggest that you do not use that term. But what we can do is work with you, I think, constructively, maybe you already have this option in law, to, for instance, sell excess buildings to the community surrounding you. Look at the types of services which the military is starting to do. Now, this is a little more applicable to bases, but nonetheless, it might apply to you. That can be contracted over, given over to local communities. That includes like landscape maintenance for military bases, firefighting, some security as well. These are the types of ideas that go toward the possibility of not pulling forward things that are no longer applicable in an innovative VA without running into the difficulties of impacting communities adversely when you close something. So don't ever use the word BRAC because it brings up a lot of bad memories and you automatically set yourself up for controversy. I've suggested to the military that we call it MISC, acronym for Miscellaneous, Military Installation Savings Commission. Maybe you work on some word acronym like that. But again, I think it's very consistent with what you're trying to do in terms of updating the VA, getting the best value for the dollar, ensuring that old ways of thinking are transformed into new ways to care for veterans. And while we're pulling forward excess inventory, that just doesn't make any sense for what you're trying to do. So those are just some final thoughts I had. I know you've covered that when I was out of the room more extensively, so I wanted to leave you with that. The other issue is I think you're going to forward to us a working list of possible changes, one of which you brought up the other day. You're in a catch-22 regarding not being able to study things that we've actually mandated you to study because we've mandated you can't study things.
Right.
Ideas like that, even though they might be small, again, back to the transformative theme, we look forward to receiving those.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Seeing no further questions, I'd like to thank everybody for their participation. Thank you, Dr. Shulkin. Again, I can see why you were confirmed unanimously. Congratulations again, and this hearing stands adjourned. Any further subcommittee hearings will occur after the President's budget submission in late May.
Thank you.
Meeting's adjourned.
Last year I got to do this. Oh, I see. It's different.
Thanks again, Doctor.
Okay,
Hold on.
thanks.
Hold on.
Take care. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
I told them there was meat enough, even in this budget.
They had enough, yeah.
We could have this hearing again and again. Very, very well.